My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and
plus
beer.
years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Saying community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset.
Right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. At the time this episode's probably airing, we would have already had our first Dispatch Dialogues webinar series. And, I'm just going to manifest it now about roundtable discussion was. I know today, at the time of this recording, I will be announcing some giveaway winners who put in to get a free seat to our virtual discussion. And I'm just excited about this other option and way of us to connect, come together, learn from one another. Because one thing about dispatch in this industry is we're all doing a really tough job, just a little differently. So we can always learn from each other. If you did attend the Dispatch Dialogues webinar, thank you. And if you have no idea what the heck I'm talking about, all good. Head to theraspydispatcher.com, check out our resources for current dispatchers, though aspiring dispatchers are welcome to join as well. Just these topics in this webinar series. We're hoping to do about 6 for the year. It's just geared more towards the folks who are actually already under the headset compared to our Unpacking the Process webinar that is strictly for aspiring dispatchers who want to learn more about what the heck they're getting themselves into. So without further delay, I'm going to introduce my guest today. I am joined by Heather, a licensed psychologist and founder of Premier First Responder Psychological Services. With over 25 years of experience working in law enforcement and public safety, Heather has dedicated her career to improving first responder mental health through peer support programs, critical incident response, and wellness training. She's a leader in cultivating resilience and creating a culture of wellness for those who serve our communities. My guest today, Heather. Hi, Heather.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'm really excited, as we were saying offline, to hear your story and how you got into public safety.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be on with you. And I love your voice. I would think that the raspiness would be such a connection to people through the headset.
I think I get a mixture of like Stevie Nicks vibes and also, are you feeling well? It's kind of, it's on. I've actually, funny story, I had a records called in to ask a question about something, and I answered the phone, and then 10 minutes later they walked in and were like, I brought you a lozenge for your and then all my coworkers were like, I was like, oh, thank you.
You're like, no, I was born with this. Thank you.
Right? Like, this is me. This is it.
I get it.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, tell us a little bit about how you got into public safety and your story.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to take you back. I think I don't do math well, but it's beyond 25 years now. I was in my 20s and I got a bachelor's in psych. And really, when you're young and going to school, all I knew is I wanted to help people. Mm-hmm. And so I took some classes in the criminal justice sector. And I'm like, I love criminal justice. It's amazing. How can I combine the two? And so I ended up getting a job working for Orange County Probation. I was a deputy probation counselor, and at the same time got a master's in criminal justice with the goal of becoming a probation officer. So I'm 26 years old. I take the test, I get on the list, and I'm waiting to promote. And at the same time, I had just had my son, Andrew, who's now 26, just to give you the time frame here. And within 6 months of having him, I am now going through a really difficult divorce with his dad. I am healing from an infected C-section. And so you combine the medical, the pain, the emotional, the how am I going to work shift work while taking care of an infant? It was becoming really, really problematic. And basically, my life turned into a giant shit show. And I didn't know how long I was going to be able to continue to do shift work while waiting for the county to do their promotion. So it was one of those moments in life at 27 where I had to pivot and walk away from the goal of becoming a probation officer for the sake of my son's, taking care of my son and taking care of me. So I found a job working at CSP Victim Assistance Programs here in Orange County. That is our victim service organization. And I ended up being there for 14 years, 12 of them as a program director. I oversaw all of our special victim programs, so gangs, homicides, sexual assault, domestic violence. And I recognized that there was a disconnect and a lack of relationships between law enforcement and the victim advocates. Without that relationship in place and trust, it was making it harder to help the victims because we weren't getting information we needed to be able to work with the detectives, investigators, and so forth. So I started ride-along programs where in the departments, our advocates would respond out and be with the officers in the field to be able to provide services for the victims right away. And then there were meetings to do meet and greets and really just develop that connection with each other, because inherently we know law enforcement doesn't trust a whole lot. And that was the beginning of that partnership. And then on June 29th, 2003, like a lot of people are like, how do you remember that far back? And the reason I remember is because on that date, it was a Sunday at 9 a.m. A man who worked at an Albertsons in the city of Irvine was suffering from schizophrenia. He walked in that morning with a samurai sword, wearing a trench coat and a beret. He killed 2, injured 3 more before he was shot and neutralized by an officer that day. Well, there was nothing in place for the 55 people in the store working and shopping when this active shooter type incident occurred. So the city of Irvine and the Albertsons Corporation were like, help us, we don't know what to do. So that was the pivot into the critical incident response field. I was there with my team about a week and a half, rendering assistance to victims and witnesses in the community. And it was during that time that I recognized that crime and victimization was like throwing a rock in a pond, and it created ripples and layers of people who were impacted. But in 2003, none of you were included in that ripple, right? We didn't talk about peer support or wellness or anything back in 2003. And so all of us were excluded. So as a result of that experience, I created a crisis response team and would respond out 24/7 at the request of law enforcement to be there to help mitigate that trauma experienced by victims, witnesses in the community. During that time, I responded to homicides, murders, suicides, traffic fatalities, baby deaths, drownings, workplace violence incident, you name it. That's whatever law enforcement was responding to, we would go as well and be there as a partner to help deal with the emotional trauma that the people involved were experiencing. And then on one very early morning, I was out with Anaheim PD, and it involved a 3-year-old who died in her sleep. And I'm at the hospital with the family and the officers. And the next thing I know, the sergeant walks over to me, has tears in his eyes, and says, Heather, I know you're here for the family, but can you go talk to the officer who just did CPR on the little girl? And so I did. And that was the pivot into a peer support role and doing first responder debriefing. And so the requests continue to show up. And I remember debriefing a deputy sheriff after a train versus pedestrian incident. And that deputy said to me, Heather, we get training in everything, but no one has ever trained us how to deal with the stressors and traumas at this job. And I still shake my head at that comment because it was such a pivotal moment in my life and in my career, because I related. It was such a huge aha moment for me. I realized that with all the education and all the training I had had, that I also did not have the training to deal with the stressors and traumas of my job. And so with that aha moment, I realized that I was also part of the collective response of, I'm fine. How are you after this incident? How are you after giving death notification to little girls? How are you after responding to a law enforcement suicide? And the list goes on and on of the critical incidents that I had been to. And yet I was saying the exact same thing that everybody in this field does, from the dispatchers who take the calls and everyone that follows. I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm good. And so what I realized is that I was doing it because I didn't want my law enforcement partners to think that I was weak and couldn't handle the job. I created the position, I created the program. And now I'm going to tell people that call me out that, oh, yeah, I had nightmares after the Salon Meritage shooting, or I was hypervigilant getting my hair cut after spending a month, being there for victims and witnesses and first responders, or that I was scared someone was in my house, or that I'd go home and hug my kids a little longer, or be grouchy and irritable from sleep deprivation, or just not talking about what was bothering me to my husband at the time. And so with this aha moment, I realized, how are we all collectively going to get to retirement being happy, healthy, and whole if we don't do something to change this culture? And so I set out to change the culture by creating a block of instruction called The Impact of Trauma on Law Enforcement, dispatchers, firefighters, whoever was in front of me, that's who it was geared towards. And it was through that experience that I realized people were suffering in silence, and that we needed to do a better job of humanizing public safety professionals and make it okay to not be okay. It doesn't mean you're not okay for the rest of your life. It just means you're not okay in the moment. It might take a few days, a week, a month, whatever it takes, but that you're a human before you are your title. And so through that experience and teaching all the sergeants at Anaheim, one stopped me after class and said, will you help us start our peer support program? That grew in the Orange County law enforcement community, where they started to ask me, hey, Heather, what's this peer support thing? And why don't we have one? And so I'm very honored and very humbled to be able to, say that I've helped most of Orange County law enforcement and some fire departments start their peer support programs. I was hired full-time at the Orange County Sheriff's Department in 2014 as the regional peer support coordinator. I was there for 5 years, watching the culture shift, teaching, responding to incidents. It was very funny. Day one on the job, I had 2 deputies approach me, and they, crossed their arms and they said, let me get this straight. They hired you to give us hugs. What is this touchy-feely bullshit? And I just shook my head and laughed and said, this is going to be awesome.
Come here, big boy. Just come right here. They're probably the SWAT guys.
That's funny, because my husband's actually the SWAT commander, and a lot of the SWAT guys I do know.
The biggest cuddler.
Seriously. I'm like, this is going to be great. And so, it was so cool to watch the culture shift. And hey, you're that peer support lady, right? And hey, we have confidentiality, right? Or hey, I have a friend, I need to run this by you. So it was a really cool 5 years. And at the same time, right before getting that position, I was tapped on the shoulder. I was 40 years old, and a commander at Irvine said, Heather, you need to go back to school and get your degree. And I'm like, I'm good. I have a master's degree. I'm done. And he said, no, you need to get the doctorate, so you have those initials after your name, and we have protected, privileged, communication with you. And so I was so honored by that. I said, all right, let's do this. And then in 2019, after a 6-year process of a degree and licensing and everything else, I left the Sheriff's Department, and that's when I started Premier First Responder Psychological Services.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for all the work you have done, because, me, I started dispatch in 2018, and in our academy, we had a day dedicated to peer support and recognizing when you're maybe struggling, and hey, let's not drink the bottle of tequila, let's drink more water. We had all that. We had a full day dedicated to that. It could probably have a week dedicated to it, but it's because of folks like you who started, having those conversations with the guys who are like, why don't I need a hug? It's the folks like you who created these peer support programs and agencies, and that ripple effect happens with the good and the bad, right? So yeah, because of the work you're doing and the work you did, more agencies and more agencies are having peer support, are including dispatch, in their debriefs, are acknowledging that trauma looks, feels, and smells differently for everyone in every level
Absolutely.
of the emergency response chain. And I think you brought up something that I don't think I think about, but I know I think about, is like that ripple effect in the people you don't talk to on the phone. It's like there are people in the room that are just seeing it who aren't necessarily directly touched by it, but are touched by it. And so
Indirectly.
exactly. So the fact
Yep.
that you had this team that would respond out to the scene and assist, kind of like the third party people, it's such a great service. And I think we're more and more and more in policing specifically, recognizing that we can't do it all. We don't have the bodies to do it all. We don't have the training to do it all, and we need more options, and having teams that
Partnerships.
having
Mhm.
teams that respond for mental health, having teams that respond for, just those hugs, like all of those things implemented into our response to the communities we serve is only helping, right?
Absolutely. And Ashley, I have to throw myself under the bus as part of my learning that I like to share with dispatchers.
Yeah.
Um, After the salon shooting,
Mhm.
I was there that night with a few colleagues. And at the end of the night, all the victims and witnesses went home, and there were like 80 to 100 people in this library.
Mhm.
And one of the guys, and I forget where he was from, but he said, Heather, can you guys stay back and debrief the first responders that are still here? And there are about 18 men and women from different departments. And not at one time did they or I, this was 2012, I believe, said, what did anyone go into dispatch? Did anyone go check on the dispatchers? And so, fast forward a year after the incident, I'm at a training, and this woman approaches me and she said, "Oh, you're Heather." And I go, "I am." I go, "Oh my gosh, Marie, it's so nice to finally meet you."
Mm.
Well, the next words out of Marie's mouth was, "Heather, you forgot us."
Mm.
And I still get the chills when I say it. I still get that dagger in my chest, because what Marie meant was that after the salon shooting, nobody went into dispatch to say, "Hey, how are all of you doing?" Because
Yeah.
they were rocked. And I use that in my trainings. I use that as an example of when you make a mistake, those moments last forever, and we learn from them, we grow from them. And I will never forget a dispatcher ever again from that day
Yeah.
forward. Every incident is dispatch included. I'm going this afternoon to do a debrief.
Mm.
And that department's great. They always have dispatch included, but I am the first to say, make sure everybody who is directly involved can be there, or at least says if they want to say no, they can say no. But we can't forget you. You are the first responder, and I believe that without you, the people in the field can't do their job.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right? You are that lifeline. You're the lifeline
Mhm.
to the callers, you're the lifeline to the officers, and the level of mental and emotional investment is huge for all of you in dispatch. So thank you so much for what you do and for what you're doing by starting this podcast and being such a presence in social media.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that when you were faced with, a situation where you could have done better, that you owned it. I think a lot of times in life in general, but especially I think in law enforcement, with admin, with leadership, there's this disconnect of I'm leader, I'm sergeant, I'm supervisor, I'm blah blah blah. I can't be wrong. Um, yeah, what you doing? Come here. Come here. What are these noises you're Come chew on this. Come on. Come on. So close. We're doing so well. um, but yeah, like I can't be wrong, and I can't admit I'm wrong to someone I'm supposed to be supervising. But the reality is we're humans leading humans,
Oh my gosh.
helping humans. Like, we will make mistakes, and it's okay to admit to that and to go, I did that. I'm going to do better next time. And, in a big way, that's affected your career ongoing, to make sure that that doesn't happen again. You own that
I
in the moment.
ab-
I know that dispatch
absolutely. No, and I appreciate what you're saying, because I think that as leaders in this space, that it's up to us to be the leaders we want to see. And that means by behaving in a way that others can say, oh, we can be um, vulnerable, we can be human and make mistakes and own them and apologize or check in with our people. And with all the different trainings I do, whether it's sergeant school or it's at the academy with brand new recruits, I even had brand new deputies out to patrol in my office in the last 2 weeks. And I said, have you gone to dispatch and introduced yourself? Because there's such a disconnect in a large agency with and they're up on a hill and the deputies are down in the streets. Mm-hmm. And they're like, this dispatcher's talking really fast and I'm having a hard time understanding. And then I hear a little attitude and I'm like, go up and introduce yourself. Off duty, on duty, I don't care, but go put a face and a name so that they feel a connection with you. Because it's through human connection, whether it's through leadership or in this way, that we are better with each other. Like, that's a basic need of human beings, is connection and appreciation.
Yeah, having that human connection, it just allows us an easier road to grace. Like, I usually never believe someone's intentionally giving me attitude on the radio, or it's a third party thing. It's not me. It has nothing to do with me. That's my mindset, but that's not for everybody, and some people need to know, like, hey, face to a name, like, oh, Heather was really snippy, but Heather's cool, so Heather wouldn't, so something must be going on. Let me check in with them, and it creates just that extended hand, and sometimes that makes all the difference.
And you're all in it together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It typically starts with the dispatch, sending the officer wherever they're going, or deputy. Mm-hmm. And that partnership is so important. Everyone needs to feel mutually respected. Mm-hmm. And that's where introducing yourself, asking questions, owning a mistake is really important. I'm all about the concept of failing forward, which means that we fail, per se, right? We make a mistake or we fail in some way. And then we look at that failure as an opportunity for growth. How can I either, make amends for this? How can I own it? How can I pay it forward? And how can I do it different so I don't make that same mistake again? Because there's so much right now. I keep hearing over and over again this idea of perfection in law enforcement. And the bottom line is, there is no such thing as perfection. There's no perfect in anything. We do the very best we can with what we have in that moment. Right?
Exactly.
You guys are a prime example of the second guessing that goes on in public safety, because how did I say it? Did I ask the right questions? Did I get enough information? It's constant second guessing, because you get what you get in that moment, and you get all the information you possibly can to send the officers and deputies out into the field, and they do the very best they can with what they've been given, and then what they show up to.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
this whole idea, right? It's like, well, yeah, I have a million examples in my head, but I just think it comes down to, and you said it so eloquently, and I can't remember, something about the pathway to grace or something of that effect.
Connection is the pathway to grace. Yeah.
I really, really love that. That needs to be like that.
Feel free.
I want you to do an Instagram post on that.
Maybe I'll do it for this podcast, for promoting our podcast.
That's awesome.
But it's true. I mean, we just, the job's hard either way. I think on the dispatch end, we're dealing with a lot of years of, this job has really shifted from answering the phone situation to a full-on CPR, like life-saving interventions. And
Yeah.
people have a hard time conceptualizing that because no one talks about dispatch, and I mean, dispatch just had its birthday and I think was 56 or 57. We've only 911 has
That's
only been
that's
around
it?
57 years. This
I did not
service,
know that.
those 3-digit numbers. Before that, you had to know your local agency's 7-digit numbers, So um, just acknowledging how much this has shifted has become hard. I think for police into dispatch, for the public calling dispatch. So we're starting to see a lot more education and conversation and people going, I'm not dealing with worse, better, or whatever. Like, this isn't what the trauma Olympics between me and the officer or me and the first responder. We're all dealing with the same trauma, just differently. And it needs to be acknowledged, and resources should be offered. And, for every state federally, we should be classified as first responders the same way the folks we show up to clock into the same shift for are.
I
But
agree.
I think having these conversations on these podcasts and not the first, there's plenty before me and there'll be plenty after me, but it matters.
It does for sure. And I support
Did I
that
lose you still?
wholeheartedly.
Yeah. And I mean, when we talk about wellness, law enforcement, like you said, you're here to give us the hugs. I mean, there's definitely a shift in culture, right? Culture change is what we're really talking about here.
Yep.
And we're talking about it as an industry, honestly, law enforcement industry, which is very slow to change, let alone dispatch. So for agencies who are starting to implement their peer support, who are starting to focus on wellness. I just got an email in my department. They're doing yoga before training. They're starting to tap into these things. How can we ensure that as a department in leadership that we're doing this in a meaningful way rather than making it feel like we're just checking a box? Because I think we can kind of dabble into that feeling where it doesn't really feel authentic. So how do folks kind of manage that and make sure it is actually intentional?
So you said the word that I actually immediately had in my head, which is authentic.
Mm, mhm,
I believe that wellness has to come from the top and it has to be authentic. That people truly need to believe in what wellness is and be able to define it and speak to it and show up for the department in that way. And then whether it's a wellness program, and I think of wellness kind of like as an umbrella, and then underneath the umbrella of wellness are various facets. We have our physical wellness, right? Our heart and blood work that gets done, and the physical fitness pieces. There is the mental health piece of that, and there's also the financial piece, and it's all connected, right? You can't talk about physical wellness if we don't connect it, because mental wellness and physical are connected. In fact, according to the American Medical Association, 85% of disease starts with the emotional state. So if we have this deep connection between mind, body, and then throw in the financial piece, throw in diet, nutrition, like wellness is holistic. And so if departments are going to address wellness, it would be my hope that it would come from an authentic place from the top down and utilize resources and build relationships with the various factions that provide those services. The other piece of that is the marketing that has to continue in regards to peer support and wellness programs. It can't just be like, oh, peer support and wellness is the catch-all for right now. This is the popular subject. So we're going to mark a box and say we have a team or we have a program, but then not do anything to show up for your people. And so a class I teach is called Peer Support Reboot and Team Building. And it's to take that particular team at a department and help them understand their motivation for being on peer support, their values, we create a mission statement, and we also create a marketing plan, a very strategic marketing plan, so that they understand what branding is, what marketing is, and why getting in front of your personnel when things are good is just as important as when things hit, shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
Like, right, like having a barbecue day, or having a, one department does a chili cook-off or a soup cook-off during the winter. There are other departments that do like an ice cream float social, and it's a fundraiser for peer support to be able to provide flowers or cards or food or whatever's going on for that department that doesn't have funding. But it's really being creative and not overthinking it, but being present in briefings, going up to dispatch with, maybe a sticker or something that helps say, hey, we're here for you. This is what peer support is. And it doesn't have to be daily, but it should be at least once a month, something that's going to help remind that we take wellness seriously, and that we're here for you as a team.
I think you definitely nailed it when you said you have to show up on good days too. I say that often when I talk about supervision and management. No one wants to know when I get the message to come into the sergeant's office. I don't want it to be the common knowledge that if you going in there, you coming out with a write-up. Like, if sergeant doesn't want to talk to you, should you ask if you need your union rep? Like, it should be like,
Right.
hey, I also come in here just to connect and just to get to know each other. And I definitely think that's the same with our resources and our peer support groups and things like that, because when we actually need those services, if they're harder to access or they feel very far away, we are less likely to utilize them.
Absolutely.
And
that's actually true too for mental health professionals. That if, like, my whole, I guess, mantra, I don't know if that's the right word, is really about relationships and partnerships. And that if I am, or we are, an extension of peer support, and we are part of the team, right? I always say it takes a village to do this work. If we're here for the department personnel, then I want to show up and go to briefings and say hi and do a meet and greet. And this is who's on the team. And this is how to access us. And this is how it's confidential. But I also like being invited to an awards ceremony. Like a couple of weeks ago, we were invited to one of the department's award ceremonies. And it's so nice to show up and give hugs when not bad things are happening.
Yeah.
Right. It's again, the face, the name, the level of comfort, so that when we do show up at 2 a.m, we walk into dispatch, or we're at the EOC or wherever we're at, that it's not like, wait, who are these people again? Like, it's okay at all levels, chaplains, peer support, mental health professionals, to make those relationships so that it's becomes more comfortable. Like you said, it doesn't feel so far away to access them when it's time.
And, debriefs are super important. And why are they important? Why should people show up to them? Why should you make sure to invite everyone involved, including dispatch? Because I think for the departments that do a good job, including everyone, there is still that level of culture shift where it's like, I'm not going to that debrief. I'm good.
I don't need
that. Yeah. Why is it important? Why should our units, our dispatchers attend these briefings, and why should departments hold them?
I love that you asked that question, because how I visualize or conceptualize a debrief is that it's a big puzzle, and that each person involved in the incident brings a piece to the puzzle that helps make the picture whole. And so that's one part of it, is that each person involved in the incident, whether they think they need it or not, brings in their piece that's really important to putting the whole picture together. So that's the first part. And the way that I facilitate them is through a 2-step model that I created, really in a funny way. I was at a department, they brought me in. This was like 15 years ago. And they said, Heather, we have an hour, make it work. And there were like 30 people in the room. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? this is all in my head, right? I'm like, okay, there's typically, there were two different models that I was trained in many, many moons ago. And so in that moment when I had an hour, I decided to ask two simple questions. And the question is, the first one is, what was your role? And I always start with dispatch because the call comes in 9 out of 10 times through dispatch. So by having dispatch start and talk about their role and how the RP, called in or whatever was going on, that sets the stage for the beginning of the story. And the best way to process trauma is to be able to tell the story because they all have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So by starting with dispatch, the first responder, and then we go through, okay, who is the next officer on, or who is the first officer on scene? And then we roll through the process. That became a really simple way to ask a question that was a non-feeling question. I call feelings the F word of law enforcement.
I think many people would agree and appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, I learned early on, like, don't ask people how they're feeling. And the feeling is too touchy-feely. So what was your role is more of like, I'll call it an operational question that turns into a way to tell their story. And a lot of times their thoughts and feelings are coming out with that one question. And so it is so helpful to have everybody there to put the puzzle back together. But also, what I'll tell people is if you don't want to go, that's okay, but please go for your partner because you have no idea how much you might be helping them by going. And to listen to people start talking about the impact of the incident on them helps to validate and normalize for everybody. Oh, I wasn't the only one who struggled to sleep that night. I wasn't the only one who, felt, I don't know, helpless or really sad, or I didn't know what happened at the end and I need closure. And now we have closure because we have detectives in who came and they come in and bring the rest of that information in. So it is so important that everyone be there if they can be there. Even if you don't need to, it's not about need anymore. It's about doing it for the sake of bringing some closure. And so I actually wrote my dissertation on critical incident debriefing and building resilience in law enforcement. And what my research showed was that the outcomes are, it helps to validate and normalize people's human response to, tragedy and trauma. It helps to bring some closure and healing to that particular incident. And it also creates a culture within a department that this is just what we do now. You don't have to think it and say, oh, I don't want to go and talk about my feelings. It's, well, this is just what our department does. We debrief these things. There's a 2-step phase and we make it happen. And they usually don't last any more than an hour and a half. And so after asking the role question, then I ask everybody, as you think about it right now, because we take in trauma through our 5 senses, the things you see and hear, right? You guys hear things you can't unhear. Smell, touch, taste. As you think about the incident now, what still stands out for you? And that question is meant to help process whatever that lingering thing is back there that maybe is still kind of stuck, that you're hearing over and over again on a loop, or you're seeing, or there's a smell that keeps coming back out. It's to help your brain process that information so that it can file away. And so that model has a lot of validation, a lot of education throughout, some teaching moments. And then at the end, I always talk about communicating based on a handout I have. It's called Normal Stress Reactions Handout. And I'll educate them on taking this home. Take this home with you, put it on your refrigerator, share it with your loved ones at home, and let them know what you're experiencing. Because those reactions can last anywhere from 3 to 30 days. And our loved ones at home don't understand what we've been exposed to and how it's going to show up in our life. And that's where a lot of isolation and disconnect come between couples and family. So I really encourage that communication and healthy coping at the end.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit on something that is maybe we don't think about when we think about debriefs. When you work through your stuff with people who get it and you receive some feedback, some tools, some things like that, it reduces that ripple effect that's going to pour onto your loved ones. I think that is, if we don't have this moment to unpack, walk through it, yeah, it can definitely bleed into our relationships outside of work where there's a little less understanding of the day-to-day things that we're dealing with.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I'm trying to prevent mental health issues, and I'm trying to prevent divorce, and I'm
Mm.
trying to prevent infidelity, and I'm trying to prevent suicide and everything else that we know that plagues this world. And we have to increase our awareness, our emotional intelligence, and our ability to communicate with people.
Mm. And I also think you made a good point because, again, and for folks who, excuse me, aren't aware, dispatch has been kind of the last group to be brought in to debriefs, for early on,
Yep.
when people started doing debriefs and started acknowledging we got to talk about this, that it wasn't it's like the phone rang, they sent us, okay, that's where the problem starts, right? Like when we got there. But the reality is, the same way we have a blinder on for what happens when our units mark on scene because we can't see it, our units have blinders on for what we're hearing that we can't tell them, because there's a lot that goes on in a phone call that you can only put into so many words. I mean, it's the biggest game of telephone ever to be played every day in the States, across the world. Someone calls, they tell us this thing out of order in weird ways. You have to unscramble it, give it to the officer, or give it to your partner who's dispatching the officers, and then they have to read through, decipher, and then kind of give it back out and see what makes sense. And then the officer's like, what the heck are they talking about? What about this? What about that? What about that? And it's like, we asked, but they're not telling us that. And it's just this huge game of telephone. So being
I never
able,
thought of it from that perspective, Ashley. That's so
yeah,
true. Yeah.
it is the word. And it's funny because when you're on this side and you're hearing the call, you're like, if they could hear the call, they would know how hard I'm trying to get them the info. And then the officer's like, why don't I have a color for the car? And you're like, I asked them 6 times. They're not giving me, So being able to sit in a debrief room and go, I answered the phone and it was this, that has to get it off the dispatcher's chest. Like, this is what I dealt with, and then clear up what the could be, anger, resentment, lack of trust because my dispatcher
Yep.
can't do their job because of whatever. And it unmuddies that water, just being able to listen and hear. So I think
It
that's awesome.
does. It really does clear things up. And I've had the opportunity to have officers, deputies, dispatchers apologize to each other. I'm so sorry if I sounded short with you, or I didn't realize blah, blah, blah. That makes a lot of sense. Like, there's so many aha moments that occur in a debrief because everyone's role is coming together. It's like, nobody, unless you're in that person's head and shoes in that moment, you're not going to understand what someone's going through. So this helps illuminate each other's position and importance in doing the work you all do.
And it's the ultimate team. I mean, I say it all
It
the time,
is.
as we are all a part of this emergency response team. We all have our roles, from dispatch to the unit to, I think who may be overlooked right after dispatch, the CSI folks who respond out to the aftermath and have to take pictures and clean it up and, all stuff. I mean, everybody plays a role and everyone is absorbing the situation the way they're absorbing it, and they need to process it, So it's definitely better.
Absolutely.
It's getting better. I would imagine since 2003 to now, it probably is just a world change of difference. But it's because of folks like you and
Thank
departments
you.
willing to say from the top down, like, Chief's going to yoga. Are you, like
Right.
it has to look like that. And it's funny to say it, but it really does. Like, you have to, top down is really where culture change is implemented.
Absolutely. And I appreciate, that's why I said what you're doing, because it it takes commitment to not only do this for a living, but then to do this podcast on your own time and to be able to show why this is so important. We're looking at everybody, and CSI is needs to be included in everything. I even say if property and evidence and records, if they're involved in a major incident, they're hearing it on the radio, they are having to process, bloody whatever. Or, I mean, I just hear so many stories throughout the last 20 years that we just want to think about that. In fact, when I do my critical incident response class for peer support, one of the activities at the tabletop is to identify all the positions within your department. And then I show a video of an incident. It's an active shooter incident. Then I say, okay, this is your department. It's 5:15 on a Wednesday night. Who's working? Because I want you to start thinking and assessing, all right, rocking upon who's everybody that potentially could be impacted by this type of incident.
Yeah.
Because we don't want people forgotten. That is the worst
So
feeling
true.
ever.
It is. It is. And I mean, I think all of us are guilty of getting in our own, what about us? And but it is again that team, everyone, should be extended the hand. And, I think we are doing better, but still got a long, long way to go. But we are beginning to really shift that culture in law enforcement. And it's been a bumpy road. But we're definitely getting to a much, much better place.
I agree wholeheartedly. And it has been such an amazing journey to watch this culture shift and to be allowed in to be able to help people along the way.
How do folks let you in? How do they find you? How do they set up meetings with you? I know I've talked to a lot of centers who are still trying to set up their dispatch support teams and stuff. So how do folks reach out to you and learn from you?
A few different ways. One would be through my website, which is premierfirstresponder.com, and it's premier1stresponder.com. Another way is to email me, heather@premierfirstresponder.com. And I'm on Instagram as well, that they could always DM me. But I feel like, the website or email is probably the best way.
Awesome. And I will include all of those links. And we do have a new resources page on our website. So we'll put it, like as seen on the podcast, on there as well for folks to easily access and find you. One of the last things that I ask everyone is what advice would you give people? And for you, maybe a little more towards wellness and preventative mental health, getting into this line of work. What advice would you give folks who are considering a career as a first responder?
The advice I give is to know themselves, to be aware of what they've been through in their childhood, adolescence, and to be able to recognize what their triggers are and to work on healing those things as they're navigating getting into public safety. Because the things that are unresolved in our childhood show up in our adulthood. And what research on resilience shows is that when you are triggered and when you have more issues that haven't been dealt with, the more impactful potentially the trauma can be on the job. So go fix and heal yourself. Become aware of what your triggers are and what has impacted your life, so that when you come into public safety, you do a better job of having the awareness and taking care of yourself from day one.
Amazing. Such great advice, Heather. Again, thank you so much for coming on to the show. I learned so much, and I'm excited to see what else you do out here in the first responder world.
Thank you so much, Ashley. It's been an amazing honor to be here with you today, and so happy I got a chance to do this with you.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll be right back with you. All right, everybody. That was another amazing episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch. I think Heather hit the nail on the head when talking about advice for folks who are considering this line of work, whether it's dispatch, firefighter, EMT officer, so on, so on, so on. You got to do the work first and foremost to be able to help others. And if you're like, Ashley, I've already been here for 20 years. I didn't do the work first. Now what? There is no time like the present. There is always today to start working on healing, working on yourself. And it doesn't have to be a huge incident that prompts you to start that. It can just be because it is a Tuesday. So definitely check out Heather's resources. I will include her website, all of her contact information, social media in the description of this episode, as well as check in with your departments. Figure out what resources you have available to you. And if you are a supervisor watching this, make that access to your department's resources easily accessible to your people so they don't feel funny when trying to figure out how to utilize it, what it is, or not do it at all because they don't know how to find it. So, hope you guys are all having an amazing week, no matter what day of the work week it is for you. Until next time, stay raspy, everybody. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Dispatch podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, or maybe even submitting your own story, you can do all that and more at theraspydispatcher.com. Until next time, stay raspy.